What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for continuing to give us support and being a member of the Royal Court. I am your host, Kingmaker. Thank you for joining us at the King's Court. Today we're going to be reacting to the conspiracy theory iceberg. This is going to be part 2. Shout out to Wendigoon for putting this all together. I love the content that he provides. This was a subscriber request to actually continue the series. I wasn't going to due to the response that it was getting, which was pretty negative. But because we did get that response from that one subscriber, I am going to continue this series. So shout out to you. With that being said, let's jump into today's video.
What is up, boys? We are now on to tier 2. There's a few things I need to go ahead and say at the beginning of the video, both so that they make sense, and some disclaimers I need to get out of the way now. After doing research into this tier, some topics, especially ones I'll cover near the end of this tier, I get why people are being banned from YouTube for talking about it. There are some things that are very controversial that I will have to kind of speak in code a little bit. But all of the terms I say, you can simply search and find out for yourselves. Just know I've got to be careful with some of it because it will get you instant zapped. Also, something I figured out while researching this,
that's good to know.
These conspiracy theories work in tiers off of each other and themselves. Like what I mean in tier 1, I mentioned giants. Well, there's one in this tier that is a more specific description of giants, and then after that, there are certain accounts in history that
the Nephilim
explained with giants. So they sort of work in stairs of each other, if that makes sense. Also, some of these theories are specifically setup theories. What I mean by that is that it'll be a concept or belief.
Oh, my glasses are fogging up.
That may not make sense on its own, but it will apply later, or at least it's something to keep in mind for later.
Okay.
For example, a lot of the ones dealt with in this tier have to do with auras and spiritualism. The reason being, a lot of the other theories don't make sense.
Can't clean my glasses off.
Iceberg, unless you're familiar with those concepts. And last thing, a few of these I'm going to introduce my own theories into.
Okay.
What I mean by that is, while researching, I've seen parallels or connections drawn between two separate things.
Yeah, a lot of times there are.
Skip around within a tier, like I'll do in this video, to connect one topic to another directly. And that is entirely my own guess on it, essentially.
Okay, sounds good. Let's do it.
There are a lot of these, so let's get started. But thank you for watching. Tier 2's title
You're welcome.
is Deep Researcher, and it's described as theories and Twilight Zone level stuff.
Okay.
Most of these entries can easily be studied through the use of mainstream medias, but they require a good grasp of how the world works to be fully understood. Common people rarely go this deep. First up, we have lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming is...
I just want to go back real quick and look at what we know off this. Lucid dreaming, obviously, the ability to control your dreams and all that good stuff. That would be phenomenal if I could do that. That'd be really cool. MK Ultra was a PSYOP plan from the CIA. That's kind of the basis of Stranger Things in 11. Hypnosis, everybody knows what hypnosis is. Fluoride potentially being in the water that we consume was also used by the Nazis to pacify their population in Germany. Project Cicada was, I don't know if it's been solved, to be honest, but it's been a ongoing, maybe ARG, like augmented reality game. Maybe it's a CIA operation to get people into the intelligence agencies that what do I want to say, that can solve it. Let's see, Admiral Byrd, we got that one. The Freemasons. I am a Freemason, so I'm going to see if that actually holds up water. Let's get back into this, man.
Is Deep Researcher, and it's described as theories and Twilight Zone level stuff. Most of these entries can easily be studied through the use of lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming is a well-known concept that during sleep, some people can control their dreams and what happens in them. I, for one, am one of these people. However, the theory comes in where people who can lucid dream can either affect things that happen in the real world or affect their thought process by manipulating things in the dreamscape. Next up is MK Ultra. MK Ultra is a rather well-known experiment that happened with the CIA in the 1970s, late 60s, in which people were brought in and influenced with psychotropics and other mind-altering drugs for the CIA to view the effects of and potentially use in PSYOPs, which again was something mentioned in Tier 1. This is a rather well-known event. Most of the theories stem from the idea that either it's still going on or it was done at a great larger scale than the populace is aware of. Next up, we have hypnosis. Again, this is one of those establishing theories, but as you know, hypnosis is influencing the watcher to either recall things from the past or implant memories. And
I don't know if it's real, man. Like,
next up, we have fluoride.
I would imagine to a
Fluoride
point
has
it
to
is.
do with the fact that in the U.S., fluoride is inserted into the tap water in order to help with tooth enamel and digestion. And
Also a prominent ingredient in Prozac.
It comes from the fact that fluoride is a chemical and can therefore chemically castrate or influence other biomechanical things in the body. So this will be more tied in later, but such as pineal gland calcification is believed to be
linked to fluoride.
Side effect of
pineal gland's your third eye right here.
Or fluoride control, as people believe. Speaking of, pineal gland calcification is the idea that the pineal gland in the body calcifies after a certain point. This is actually true, however, the side effects of the theory are not. The way the pineal gland works is it has to do with growth and hormone supplements in the body. After someone passes puberty, it's not really needed anymore, and the gland simply calcifies and dies out. The theory comes from the idea that things such as fluoride and other things taken in the body causes the gland to calcify and keeps us from reaching either our full brain or physical potential. This goes into weird theories about how to uncalcify and things such as, but it is true that as you get older, you don't need the pineal gland anymore, so it kind of just withers away.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the pineal gland also releases small amounts of dimethyltryptamine, DMT, which causes hallucinations or hallucinatory events. A lot of people use DMT to communicate with spirit worlds or God or whatever you call it, other dimensional beings, not sure, but that is the theory.
Next up, we have cicada. This is in reference to cicada 3301, which was a large-scale code breaker event that happened in 2012. A random account appeared with the name Cicada 3301 and had these large puzzles for people to solve. There have been a total of 3, with a new one being added every time the last one gets figured out. However, the third one, to this day, despite being posted in 2016, has still not been found.
Yeah, that's
out.
what I thought. I mean,
the site says the reason for this is that they are recruiting code breakers from some kind of secret project that no one's aware of.
Yeah, probably the government, to be
rabbit
honest.
hole to go down. I may make a video on it someday. There's several videos out there, and give the third puzzle a look. You may be the code breaker that's wanted for whatever super sleuth activity they got planned.
Like, this isn't normal code breaking. You have to understand, like, radio wave frequencies and imaging through that means, which I don't understand, so I don't even spend time on this one.
The McFly code is our first look at one of the more kooky ones. It is a belief that the Back to the Future movie predicted 9/11. The evidence of this is saying such as the shopping mall that takes place in the movie is Twin Pines Shopping Mall, or the fact that the first clock of the movie shows 9:55, which on a hand dial would be 9/11, and things such as, and this all connects to the idea that the people who did 9/11 make movies and blah blah blah, you get it. Dowsing or is an idea that using a fork of metal, people can pick up on sonic vibrations from the earth in order to find
water,
supplies of water, oil, etc. It's more of a wives' tale than anything now.
Oh, yeah.
But there is some truth to it when it comes to how people used to find.
Apparently there are people called water witches that will come out and find leaks in the ground for water with dowsing rods. It's really weird.
Oil refineries. However, the way this loops back into a theory is it's one of those establishing ones again. There are sonic vibrations within the earth. Next up, we have Admiral Byrd, and this is one of the first really interesting ones.
This will get you kicked off YouTube.
Admiral Byrd was sent to Antarctica shortly after World War II in something called Operation High Jump, which was essentially
whichever way it is,
to figure out whatever the Nazis were looking for in Antarctica during World War II, which relates to this place called Base 221, which was supposedly a Nazi outpost in Antarctica. When he returned back, he was put into isolation for 36 hours and was told not to speak of what he found to anyone under any circumstances, to which he was then given the Medal of Honor and told to leave. While this is odd, many connected to the idea of what the Nazis were looking for in the first place, which is something known as Agartha, which brings us into our
the inner Earth.
In theory, Agartha is a civilization located beneath the Earth. This gets into a larger idea called Hollow Earth theory. that inside of the Earth, it is essentially a flipped gravitational pull, and there's an entire world operating beneath us. What's interesting throughout history is how different civilizations and leaders have been...
They believed that the entrance to Agartha was in the South Pole somewhere. Admiral Byrd happened to find, in theory, right, this is what he says. I don't believe this necessarily, but this is what he said, that when he flew to Antarctica, he found the edge of the ice wall. It was like 60 meters tall or something. I can't remember exactly what the dimensions of the ice wall were, but they believe on the other side of the ice wall is the entrance to the hollow earth.
Dedicated to finding this quote-unquote Agartha, such as Hitler during World War II, and other...
Also, side note, the Nazis were very, very into the occult. You need to look up, like, the Black Sun. Very, very into occult.
Ancient tribes have tales of people that live beneath. How that's connected is since Agartha is what Germany was looking for in World War II, and since that's where Admiral Byrd went to go look and then was told to shut up and never talk about it, many believe Admiral Byrd found Agartha and then was told to simply never talk about it. Next up, we have Weather Control, or
HARP. Yep.
HARP stands for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, which is an actual military base located in Alaska.
As far as HARP goes, I don't know if they control the weather. I think you can definitely do things to modify and tamper with the weather, but really, I don't think Mother Nature is going to let humans do all this crazy stuff.
The purpose of the space is to monitor weather activity, although many have accused it as being a weather control base, such as Hugo Chavez saying that the earthquakes that occurred in South America were due to meddling at the HARP location in Alaska. This goes deeper. There's a lot of people who trace the weather around the area to look for signs on it, so you can check it out yourself. But basically, the idea in Alaska that the government has a weather control base. Freemasons is another one of those establishing ideas. It essentially goes off of the well-known idea that the Masons are shady and they influence several politics and events that happen around the world. So this is another one of those asterisk ones. Keep the Masons in mind for things that come later.
Okay. Not nearly as exciting as people think. Yes, there are things that go on that are secretive to the organization. We say that we are a society with secrets, not a secret society, because everybody knows about Freemasonry. Yes, there are influential people that are Freemasons. There are also people that are average, everyday citizens that are Freemasons. It is a fraternity for men to make men better. Do I know what goes on at the higher levels? There are 3 levels of Masonry. There's the Entered Apprentice, the Fellowcraft, and the Master Mason degree. There's no extra levels. There's no 33rd degree Freemason. There's only 3 degrees. Now, when you break into an appendant body, such as the Scottish Rite, the York Rite, that's when you can go up in different degrees, but that is not Freemasonry. Yes, you have to be a Mason to enter those, but no, there are no higher tiers of Freemasonry. So when people start talking about, I'm a 33rd degree Freemason, no, there's only 3 degrees, and the top one is Master Mason. It's not until you move into an appendant body when you go up in degrees, but it's not Freemasonry.
The 23 Enigma is simply that. An idea that the number 23 is
like Michael Jordan.
History in things such as dates and events, a number of casualties, and things such as. You can look into this one yourself. It's really
I'm pretty sure that was Michael Jordan's number.
About it, starring Jim Carrey, but essentially the idea that the number 23 is to be avoided. Next up, we have astral projection.
Okay.
Astral projection relates a lot to lucid
Everyone knows
dreaming,
this one.
It's a little bit different. The idea of astral projection is that while sleeping or in a trance-like state, someone can remove their soul or their consciousness from their body and walk around and influence things. Experiments with this include hospitals who have put messages on the roof, and people who claim to astrally project have projected above the hospital, so to speak, been able to read what was on the roof, come back down, and tell the doctors what they saw. Next up, we have succubi. This will relate more to
everyone knows this one too.
Giants, but essentially the idea is that there are these supernatural entities disguised as women that feed off of men's energy by appearing
also
as
see
a
the
sexual
incubus
being, or
for the other way around.
Force or things such as. Eastern philosophy is incredibly vague. I can only imagine this is also a setup. as it applies to Hinduism and Taoism, and just general ideas of spirituality, yin and yang, and so on.
As far as Hinduism goes, I don't know much about Taoism, but the Vedic cosmology is phenomenal. So if you're into this stuff, look up Vedic cosmology. Listen to the Bhagavad Gita on audiobook. You can find it on YouTube. It's really fascinating, the stories that you learn, because India is a very, very old country and has a lot of rich history and detail that has been provided and passed down throughout the years.
And so forth. Nephilim is what I was
I love
referring
this.
to
Love
earlier
it. Love it.
Speaking of giants.
Yep.
Nephilim is a more specific concept. Specifically in the Old Testament, it says that some of the angels that fell to earth whenever Satan was cast out had children with humans on earth, and that created creatures known as Nephilim, or giants. In the Old Testament, several of the tribes that were wiped out, or ordered to be wiped out by God, were these Nephilim creatures.
Some of them survived.
Such as Goliath from the Bible are specific instances of it. Where this goes further is the idea that they still exist in modern day, or small tribes and civilizations are made up of them.
Yep.
The missing cosmonauts relates to the Cold War space race.
I don't know anything about this.
Before Yuri Gagarin was successfully shot into space, that Russia shot up several other people, but since they all died or never made it back to Earth, they simply kept it quiet as a way to not cause bad publicity.
I mean, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. It's propaganda.
This one is definitely more feasible than others on the list. The idea that the Russian government would cover up failures in its space program, but it does make it horrifying to think about how many people could have died in the search for the man in space. The Dyaltov Pass is an interesting one.
I don't know this either.
Absolutely make a video on someday. But the short version is 9 researchers went missing in Russia in the Siberian area, and when they went to be found, they were all dead, either from having all of their bones shattered, their jaws ripped off, other horrifying scenarios that in no way seemed natural, to the point that the coroner's report on it says they were killed by a, quote, overwhelming compelling force, which could be literally anything. Like I said, it's a very interesting story and very creepy, and I encourage you to check it out yourself. Declassified documents is also super vague.
Yeah, that's really vague.
This is probably just referring to the JFK files and other government documents that have been released.
I mean, technically they released UFO files.
And the fact that they proved and disproved several conspiracy theories, so yeah, go figure. Summoning is also a setup concept.
I mean, demons?
Basically just the idea that people can bring in evil or good entities.
Channeling, summoning.
Or rituals.
Yep.
So specific.
A lot of people believe that demons are the primary ones, right? So when we start talking about like paganism and Wiccan religions where they talk about working with deities, you know, Christians, Judaism, they would even Islam would refer to them as jinn, demons. They are talking about deities that, you know, when we're talking about like Osiris, Anubis, Azazel, who else fell? Samael, you know, these angels that are fallen. So a lot of people believe that the demons or these deities that they work with are fallen angels from the original creation story. So definitely channeling, I think, is a serious thing that people can do. And even if it's not, right? Even if it's not real, people believe it in their minds and it alters their own reality. So when we start looking at objective versus subjective reality, maybe in the objective reality, nothing's changed, right? The reality that you, I, everybody sees, that we all agree on exists, maybe nothing changes, but to that person, in their subjective view, everything changes because now they have a different mindset thanks to whatever they are talking to or communicating with. So at one point, it does invalidate them because there is no objective reality change, but subjectively, yes, it is changed. So it does validate the idea of summoning or channeling demons, angels, deity, whatever you want to call them.
Supernatural beings can be conjured up by an individual. One of which is another concept on the iceberg, tulpas. Tulpas are what we would traditionally figure as an imaginary friend. Essentially the idea that someone can think an entity up so much and imagine
that's what I was talking about,
that a spirit inhabits that being. So the idea that
kind of
imaginary friends kids have, or ideas that always set in your mind, are not merely ideas but are now possessed by a specific entity. So Don't worry about that monster under the bed too much. Operation Bluebeam was an idea forwarded by Sergey, whatever, Manast, which said that NASA was working with the UN and world governments to pose a new religion in which NASA would fake the second coming of Christ in order to set up the Antichrist as the Godhead. And it essentially relates.
The biggest problem with faking the second coming of Christ is we have so much digital CGI and all the stuff that you can imagine that no one would believe it if it actually happened until they were burning alive. So, in all reality, no one's going to believe that Christ is coming back until, well, maybe the Christians will, but no one else is going to, because they're going to think it's fake. It's on the internet. It's not real.
To the end of times, the idea that all world governments are working together to destroy the population, and he called this entire thing Operation Bluebeam. So yeah, occult knowledge is also a super vague one.
Yeah.
Basically,
all this is occult knowledge.
Occult itself. So occult's defined as anything that is supernatural but not strictly spiritual. So werewolves, monsters, creatures,
witches, warlocks,
et cetera, et cetera.
Demons.
Again, this is another setup.
I mean, it's supernatural.
Like even halfway done. Magica was weird to find anything for, mostly because I think there is a card game of the same name. But from the best I can figure, Magica is essentially the idea that magic is divided into 5 categories: that of the arcane, the illusionary, the aura, manipulation, and elemental.
Okay.
So I could be completely off, but that's all I could find.
Okay.
Next, we have the shelled or firmament earth.
Okay.
This comes from
is
the idea
the Bible.
Genesis in the Bible, that before
the Van Allen
flood,
belt,
the earth was covered with a firmament, or essentially a wrapping of water that allowed oxygen to flourish and things such as. Now, it's mentioned in the flood that firmament was destroyed. However, theorists believe that
the water separated above the waters from the waters below, or something like that.
Sort of exists within a shell. And most of what I found with this related back to Hollow Earth theory, so I think they're kind of tied, if not directly.
I can see it.
Men in Black is a
I mean, everybody knows this one.
Rather well known, that government agents who simply wear a suit and use fake
shout-outs to Will Smith
to cover up evidence often. This relates to theories such as Polybius, which we'll get into later, or people going missing, and it's essentially the deepest level of government cover-up you can go, that completely nameless and identificationless people will show up in black suits and change things however the government wants them. The Boy in the Box is a real case that happened in 1957 in Philadelphia, in which a boy's body was found in a box on the side of the river, and he was never identified. This was weird because no one nearby reported a missing child, no orphanages reporting missing children, nothing. It was just a body found in a box for some reason.
That is, murder or foul play. Terrible.
But no one ever knows who did it.
That's horrible.
There's never been any connection made. Most theories relate to the idea that it was a cover-up by an orphanage or things such as, but it doesn't change the fact that it's odd that a child could just disappear and no one would notice.
Yeah, it's a shame that it happens every day.
Is another setup. Basically, the whole Matrix idea that reality itself is either one giant simulation for everyone.
There's a really good idea that it is a simulation.
In 2016,
these people were stupid.
People showed up in clown costumes with knives and weapons and began threatening people in public.
Here in America, right, because we have so many people that have the right to bear arms and do believe in our Second Amendment right, this is dumb. This is dumb. When you scare people and you threaten their lives or put them in fear of danger, you're going to get shot. You're going to get killed. It's not funny. It's just dumb. Do not do this. This is not a prank. This is how you get killed.
What's interesting about this is ask yourself, do you know of anyone that dressed up as a clown? Or have you heard of anyone dressing up as a clown? And why did it happen in thousands all across the U.S. at once? No one's ever came forward. There were never any public plans made. But yet, all at once, they just showed up and then went away. Weird. Divination is the idea that one can see the future or have premonitions of the future through supernatural means. So essentially through meditation or summoning, someone can figure out what will happen in the future. Space is fake is exactly what it says.
NASA said it was all CGI. It had to be.
It is a simulation, or it is a sort of curtain that's been put up by extraterrestrials in order to give the illusion of space, even though it's not real. Pantheism is a more traditional
multi-deism?
idea that there is not necessarily a God, but more so that God
it's a pantheon.
is a being completely outside the understanding.
If you want to learn more about this from a biblical perspective, check out Dr. Michael Heiser. He is phenomenal. He is a scholar in both, I believe, Hebrew and the English version of the Bible, and he talks about how Christians have it wrong in that God is a pantheon. It's a pantheon of deity. There's Elohim, which is the top, and then there are Elohim, which are the subordinates. So it's really weird. Check out Dr. Michael Heiser. Oh crap, I can't remember the name of the book, but if I remember it, I will yell it out in the video.
People, and instead exist all
reversing. No, never mind. Can't remember it. Sorry. Keep going.
Around us, everywhere at once. Or we are essentially a
reversing Hermon. I don't know why it took me so long to get it. Check out Dr. Michael Heiser's Reversing Hermon.
Part of God. It is a very spiritualist idea of the universe. Intelligent design is
that's
exactly
God.
What it says. That people were made intelligently and with purpose, as opposed to a random set of
it's just like the Bible.
Coincidences. And this is pretty much the basis of every religion, that people were created rather than accidentally. LA oil rigs was interesting.
I don't know anything.
I had no idea about it until reading this. Apparently in LA, regular oil rigs are not up to code or sightly for the city, so they're hidden in completely normal buildings like this.
Really?
Every floor you see is fake. All of it is just an exterior covering, and inside is just
I can see that. Like, that seems plausible.
All down the street in LA. Also, this isn't really a theory, it's literally what it is. There are oil rigs working inside of fake buildings in LA. Ghost Girl is also very fake. I think this is just simply referring to the idea of a ghostly girl watching over people when they sleep, or in the corners when
that's not creepy at all. Thanks, Wendigoon.
Something a lot of people can relate to, I hope. Operation Fishbowl was real-world events that happened in 1962, in which the government started launching nukes into the atmosphere.
To see if they could break the firmament.
Essentially to see what happened. It was called Operation Fishbowl because of the shape that the nuclear cloud would take when that high in the atmosphere. Not only did this probably have disastrous consequences on the weather and environment, but the whole thing Oppenheimer was afraid of, that the nuke could light the atmosphere on fire and kill us all. Not 20 years later, they were directly firing them at the atmosphere to see what would happen. So, good job, team. Archdemons and Archangels is another idea that comes from Christianity.
Love it.
Archangels were the lead warriors.
Michael, Gabriel,
angels,
Cyril.
Cast out of heaven
who else is there?
So this is just the idea of these very powerful demons and angels existing. The Philosopher's Stone is an idea that was originally put forward by Charlemagne the Great of what is now Holy Roman Empire. That's it.
Okay.
The Philosopher's Stone was the basis of what is known as alchemy, which is essentially converting
Full Metal Alchemist, great anime.
Kind of element. This stone was something he wrote about several times in his findings.
Transmuting lead to gold.
Approaching another element could simply turn it into something else. So what ancient societies would know as magic, we would know as
chemistry,
extreme radioactive properties, or whatever have you with what theory you're following. What's interesting is the Philosopher's Stone, as it's mentioned, has never been found, although there are things similar. So it is, like I said, essentially the bedrock of what is now alchemy.
There are bacteria that turn what they eat into gold, so it's actually really interesting. It doesn't produce large amounts, but it does produce gold.
My red is not your red. It's kind of novel.
Objective versus subjective reality.
That just because I see a color one way does not mean you see a color one way. We could see completely different colors, but because we've both spent our entire life thinking that something is blue, we both call it blue without knowing. We each see different kinds of blues. It's just that concept. Vampires, while at first maybe
everybody knows this one.
It does make sense in the grander scheme of things, and it's on this list. For example, take old world ideologies.
They used to build covers, like steel covers over graves to keep the vampires inside the grave.
Or tied up, or in some cases flipped upside down in their coffin. What would the reason for that be unless they had seen something that made them think that was necessary? And it leads into this whole idea of maybe our understanding of humans in history isn't what we think it is. Aura is another setup one. It's essentially the idea that humans exude this spiritual energy around them that changes.
I think this is true, right? Because you can tell when someone's having a bad day just by their demeanor. You can also tell when somebody's feeling great because just the energy that they exude. I don't know if it's going to be like, oh, your aura's purple or your chakra's glowing or, Goku powering up. But I definitely think there is a presence and an energy that we can feel from other people based upon how they're feeling.
Changes with their mood and things such as. And this goes into gravitational pulls and sonic vibrations of the earth and things such as. Francis Levy's handprint is interesting. I didn't know anything about this until doing the research for this video. In 1924, a man named Francis Levy was a firehouse worker who, while cleaning a window, got ordered to go away on a call. On that call, him along and 7 other crewmen died in a fire.
Okay.
After this whole event was over, someone tried to spray the window of the firehouse and his handprint would not come off. This got to the point where they used bleach, acid, pressure washers, all of it. And it became a novelty around the town. People would come to see it. The glass company came to try to see if they could figure it out. But for whatever reason, this handprint was perfectly formed onto this window. The ending is kind of ridiculous though. In 1944, a boy who was throwing newspapers through one and broke the window.
Oh, that sucks.
Ending the legacy. But it is odd that this handprint stayed completely unfazed by all of the removal process for 20 years.
That's crazy.
Bohemian Grove is a 2,700
Bohemian Grove,
campsite in the western
mock
United States,
sacrifices,
which has been
President
home to
Bush,
several presidents such as Reagan, Nixon, etc. What's weird about Bohemian Grove is
Alex Jones snuck in there.
Around it. For example, there are no pictures taken during certain commencement ceremonies, and people who have claimed to sneak in and take pictures have gotten some weird stuff from it. This all goes back to the idea of secret societies and things that happen, but essentially Bohemian Grove is a gathering place for world elites to do who knows
rituals.
Lost
civilization. Right. So what you saw in the center of that was an effigy or statue to the demon or god Moloch, also known as Baal, the owl or the bull. So look that up. That's what they're praying to. For the wisdom, the knowledge, money, all the power and all that stuff. That's what those entities represent.
Is simply in reference to the fact there are entire societies that are known about in ancient texts, but that we just can't find. The Mayans,
Atlantis,
for example, was supposed to have 3 giant cities, and only 2 have been discovered. With our understanding and GPS satellites, it's really weird that these entire civilizations just simply can't be found. The Vikings are another one. Several of the sites that they talk about being set up at or where they lived have just never been discovered. This goes into conspiracies of cover-ups or of information being hidden and things such as. But it's an interesting concept that these entire worlds can just disappear.
Yeah.
Paranormal beings is also super vague. Just supernatural entities that defy. Professional sports scripted is exactly what it says.
Like wrestling.
Elites make up what happens in the games, even if the players aren't necessarily aware of it, in order to drive revenue in the right direction, or ticket sales, or blah blah blah.
Like I can see that with wrestling for sure.
Cinema in itself is not a theory; it's a real thing.
Yeah,
it's simply the idea
pretty gross.
that people will actually take videos of people being murdered or raped or things such as, and sell them on the dark web or in shady circles. Where most of the theory comes in,
it's pretty gross.
Who makes these may be higher up elitist, or at least the buyers might be. So while this is a real world thing, it gets a lot more creepy when you think about who may be consuming it. Gang stalking is a phenomenon that is mostly observed in schizophrenics, but it is the idea that several mundane people are following you at any given time.
I wonder if that's anything like targeted individuals.
You walk up to the mailbox, your neighbor looks at you. Whenever you drive to work, a car pulls up beside you and it's kind of going the same speed. And when you get to work, someone keeps glancing at you. The idea of gang stalking is that all these people are in on it and are conspiring against you for some reason. This is also seen a lot in conspiracy theorist circles, with ideas that people who know too much are being followed by essentially men in black in disguise.
Here's the biggest problem, right? We don't need people to follow us. We post on social media daily. I'm in my room recording right now all my thoughts and thought processes over different types of media, just giving it out on the internet freely. They don't need to track me. They know exactly where I am. The cell phone in my pocket tells them exactly where I am. Like, they don't need to put microchips in vaccines. Like, they don't need to. We tell on ourselves.
Experiments on humans, also super vague, but as mentioned before, with things such as MK Ultra and experiments that we know happened in World War
Like, there was
II,
a super soldier program.
Kind of a real thing. I guess the theory would be the extent of it or the modern application of it. Sixth extinction is the idea that there have been 5 primary extinctions in history, such as
there's going to be a final one,
Ice Age and things like that. And we are currently on the 6th extinction, which would be man and would be a man-made issue that we created ourselves. Pseudosciences relates to old world theories, or mostly old world theories of things such as the 4 constants in the body being science or spiritualism and things such as. And essentially, where it relates to conspiracy theories, is saying that there is more credit to it than has been disproved by science, and the discredit of it is simply repression. The Saturn rings theory comes from the idea that the rings of Saturn were created when an asteroid collided into it some time ago, and the particles of that asteroid were simply caught in its gravitational pull and formed Saturn's rings. Where this gets creepy is thinking that Saturn, speaking in space, is not that far from us. So if something can hit it, something can hit us. Polar shift is essentially the idea that over time the Earth's magnetic poles have shifted, and this will inevitably lead to a cataclysmic event of tectonic plates smashing together and earthquakes and storms and what have you. It's essentially an end of the world idea. The Large Hadron Collider is a real thing that exists in, I believe, Germany. But the entire point of it is...
I think it's Switzerland.
Essentially a giant
Geneva.
To shoot particles at each other at speeds of light. What's interesting is the last time this was done, it created a new particle called the Higgs boson.
Higgs boson, the God particle.
What it essentially did was prevent the machine from being used further. And I should also mention, before this firing happened, there was a shock wave that ripped through the machine, damaging it and making them take more time to repair it.
A lot of people think that the Large Hadron Collider is the catalyst for things like the Mandela effect, where the Bearstein Bears or the Bernstein Bears, whatever you want to call it, a lot of people believe that the Large Hadron Collider has something to do with this. Plus, it had that opening ceremony where there was clearly a pagan ritual. So, I mean, a lot of people think that it has something to do with wickedness and spiritual eliteness. I don't really know.
A physicist theorized that since time works as a 4th dimension, that shooting 2 particles together at such speeds would theoretically create a black hole. But since the way time and waves work, and there's people who can explain this much better than I can, shock waves ripple backwards through time in order to prevent us from causing an event that would theoretically destroy the future version. This all has to do with the idea of time as a 4th dimension, and we just move through it linearly, although it can be manipulated, and yada yada yada. It's really cool stuff. Look into it yourself if you like, but that's the idea. Oumuamua is a body of space debris that passed near our sun some years ago and was viewed from the research station of the same name in Hawaii. What was interesting is that analyzing the particles of this, it seemed to be rather homey to us. It contained carbon and things that look like Earth and stuff such as, and was probably launched after a star exploded some however many galaxies away. What's interesting is the idea that if that Earth was destroyed, and also keep in mind, this thing would have been a whole lot bigger than our Earth. If that super Earth was destroyed by its sun exploding, what means the same couldn't happen to us?
Oh, it's going to happen eventually.
The World War II Black Book was a book that was found in Berlin in 1945 that had the name of several British citizens, in fact thousands of them, with their names, addresses, and places of work that were essentially on a hit list, so to speak, if Germany was to win the war. What's weird about this is why the Black Book would still exist at such a point as 1945, when Germany was pushed all the way into Berlin, and the details are that it was found in a sofa somewhere in Berlin, and it couldn't have been the Reichstag, because that place was absolutely burned to the ground. So there are several theories about why this book was created, if this book is real, etc., etc. Fish rain is a phenomenon that occurs for
I think this can actually happen.
Reason,
like, it rains frogs and stuff, too.
Various times throughout history, fish have begun to fall from the sky. Similar things have happened with rats, snakes, etc. The leading theory is that somewhere hundreds of miles away, a tornado happened that either pulled these things out of the water or off of land and threw them that far. But even then, that doesn't necessarily make sense looking at some of the specific instances it's happened.
Yep.
So it's just weird. Figure it out for yourself. Clinton body doubles is exactly what it says.
Yeah.
Several times in the public, the Clintons have used body doubles at either politically challenging times or times they were under scrutiny in order to not die. The butterfly effect is a concept that most
the movie was about. This is a pretty good movie.
Travel theory and things such as that one very minor change will cause a series of changes to happen afterwards that can affect the course of history. For example, if I was to simply do this video a minute longer and not leave the house, well, that could cause me to end up in a car accident that may kill me or injure me or something rather, which would change the course of history all because of one seemingly meaningless task.
Yep.
This is where you hear the whole, don't go back into the past and flip over a stone, you could change world history.
Yep.
This is just that laid out. Ninjas are a Japanese legend of these giant human-like sort of porpoise-looking creatures that
don't know much about it. I've seen this picture at least.
And sing sailors into their death. These are very different from mermaids, not only in their appearance, but the fact they are much, much larger.
Okay.
I believe up to 50 feet in some of the legends descriptions. But what's also interesting is that there are several very similar things to ninjas mentioned in Viking culture and in Indian culture and things such as.
Okay.
Which makes it weird considering these tribes have never had contact with each other. So,
that's a lot of old
massacre is in reference to the Patterson
let me pause this. That's a lot of old theories about like the ancient civilizations that, you know, one person on this side of the world couldn't have communication on this side of the world, so how can they be painting the same paintings unless there's something else externally allowing them to know the same thing? I don't know, like maybe like a demon or a angel or God or whatever you want to call it is communicating with both tribes, and they're both painting their detailed pictures of that being.
For those that don't know, it is the very famous video or supposed first sighting of Bigfoot. If you watch the entire tape, at the beginning there seems to be something on the ground that appears as a pool of blood, and the men in the video are washing blood off of their hands. The idea of this being that these people were up there hunting for Bigfoot and simply started taking the video as the last one was leaving or walking around the campground. This leads into the idea among Bigfoot hunters that the reason we don't see them is that they were hunted out by people, and what we're seemingly watching here is the last group near the public eye being massacred. When I mentioned at the beginning, there are things that can get me kicked off of YouTube immediately. This is what I was referring to. So feel free to look it up in your own time. I'm going to be very light with it. The Houdin plan.
I don't know anything about this.
An idea imagined by anthropologist Edward Houdin, which essentially said after World War II they needed to do something about the Germans, and the best thing to do was something called the Great Replacement Theory. And I'm going to stop talking there and you can figure it out for yourself. The oil pit squid was discovered in Indiana, in which while cultivating an oil source, there was an 8 to 12 inch squid that popped out, and supposedly this has happened more than once by oil crews in the area. This makes absolutely no sense because the squid shouldn't be able to survive in oil, and why is it in the middle of landlocked Indiana?
Why would this get you kicked off YouTube?
A lot of the information I found on this related back to the Hollow Earth idea. Regardless of what your theory is on it, it's very weird that this thing exists at all. And then lastly, I'm going to get into the two most interesting theories that I found on this tier, and I believe that they're interconnected to each other. The first is the people of the mount theory. The background of it essentially works like this. In the 1820s, there was an animal researcher who was trying to figure out why lemurs existed in some parts of the world and on others and seemingly skip giant areas. This was one of the first groundworks that led to the idea of Pangea, and that all of the continents were originally pushed together. However, even going off of Pangea, that would mean there was a giant portion of land that just doesn't exist anymore, with the idea being whenever the plate shifted, it simply sank below water. The name of this unidentified continent was called Lemuria.
Oh yeah, Lemuria.
Lemuria. Near the coast of where this supposed Lemuria is supposed to be is an area known as Mount Shasta. Locals have said that at night you can see people leaving in robes. And these people are tall, like much taller than any person can be, 9 to 10 feet. Supposedly beneath Mount Shasta is a completely hollow ground, and then the survivors of this Lemuria sought it
like Lemurians, Pleiadians. This is really popular in New Age spiritualism.
In 1904, a researcher went to Mount Shasta and said he found miles and miles of underground caves full of gold and silver and crystals and things such as. But whenever he put together a team to go research it, he disappeared, which is weird. Most of what I found on Lemurians and the people of the Mount, again, relates back to Hollow Earth.
Oh, again, I don't know why this would get kicked off YouTube.
Stage, the idea that there is this untouched race of people existing.
Unless he was just speaking about that one specifically.
Times. This also relates to
Crystal Skulls, yeah, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull.
There are 13 perfectly made crystal skulls that have been found variously around the world. But what's odd about them is while they're all made exactly the same, no one can place where they came from. They're each recovered from different dig sites and seem to have the same properties as one another, yet no one really knows where they came from. And every accusation where they came from, such as pre-Columbia or Spain or whatever, has been proved false. According to the legend surrounding these skulls, though, they supposedly contain energy. Anyone who touches the skull or comes into contact with it shares their memories with it, and then that is passed on to the next handler, and so on and so forth. What's interesting about this is part of what the researcher mentioned who got lost in the Mount Shasta cave in 1904 is that they communicated using crystals. When I was reading this for this tier, keep in mind these are two different theories, I thought it was wild that these crystals that Lemurians have to supposedly communicate with each other seem to be the same things that these skulls were that supposedly communicate with each other. And no one knew where the skulls came from, and
that's why people use crystals to store energy.
I don't believe in this. I think it's neat. So to encompass this whole theory together, especially with other stuff seen in the tier, that would mean that the Lemurians did go underground but found either the Agartha beneath Earth or at least hidden passageways that work all the way under Earth, and there is an entire civilization of humanity existing apart from ourselves underground, and periodically their belongings, such as these crystal skulls, are found in other parts of the world. So there's my huge headcanon secret underground mole people. And that will do it for tier 2. This was a long one.
Yeah, it was. It was really long.
Like I said before, we are still on tier 2 of 10. They only get crazier from here. Most of the ones I talked about now are still conceivable. Like I can tell you the words and you can understand what I'm saying. As we get into later ones,
it's going to get a lot more cryptic.
You're just going to have to bear with me and try to figure out what nonsense I'm talking. But as always, and as mentioned before, thank you for watching.
That was the Conspiracy Theory Iceberg Part 2. Thank you, Wendigoon, for putting this together. Really, I'm surprised there was only one that you couldn't talk about on YouTube. I would imagine that there would be a lot more. If you guys enjoyed this content, if you enjoyed my reaction to this video, please leave a like, leave a comment, talk to me, let me know. If you have questions, let me know. Come join us in Discord. The link's down in the description. Just let's hang out. Welcome to the King's Court. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Peace.